What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan, and in today's video, I want to talk about how a single card not only changed Disney Lorcana's meta, but also caused quite a bit of controversy in the Disney Lorcana community. And that card, of course, is going to be Pete, Games Referee. Now, for those of you that don't know, Pete was a card that came out in Shimmering Skies Set 5 for Disney Lorcana. It is the first set that we've gotten for the game that was not a part of the original release schedule for Disney Lorcana. Ravensburger originally thought out 4 complete sets to come out over the course of the year. Set 5, Shimmering Skies, is the first set that continues on the expansions after the initial release schedule. Now in Set 5, we got a steel card, Pete, Games Referee, and this card has the ability Blow the Whistle. When you play this character, opponents can't play actions until your next turn. Now the limiting of actions is not unique to this card. In Set 2, we actually got a Tiana card that also prevented opponents from playing actions, but Tiana required you to have no cards in your hand and Tiana to be exerted, meaning she was vulnerable, and it took more than one turn to get the ball rolling with this combo. With Pete, since it is a when you play this character effect, because this card can be played directly from your hand, it's great to go wide and give your side of the board safety from a board wipe like Be Prepared or Grab Your Swords. And then also it can interact with existing mechanics like Bounce, where you can pick this back up, put it in your hand, and then reuse it at a later time. And being a 3-cost card and inkable, this easily slotted into almost every single steel deck as a must include 4 copies of, and very quickly started to disrupt the normal flow of Lorcana games. Now, one of the first real meta decks of Set 5 was Steel Song, and this deck was very popular because with the addition of Prince Devine, you were able to play a song for free, and now you have a Singer 6 questing for 2 on the board, meaning you can get your Whole New World out for free a turn earlier, or you can combo him with things like Along Came Zeus, Let the Storm Rage On, Raging Fire, allowing you to basically double up on your turn and get to play 2 actions with a Enter the Battlefield effect character. Another card from Set 5 that was very popular in this deck was actually the Daisy Duck Donald's Date. Daisy Duck, when you quest with her, she is a uninkable 1/4 questing for 2, but when you quest with her, your opponent gets to draw a card, reveal it, and if it's a character, it goes into their hand. If it's not a character, it goes to the bottom of the deck, allowing you to put a little bit of a hiccup into decks that rely on a lot of powerful songs or items coming off the top of their deck, but you ran the risk of giving your opponent extra characters. They got further into their deck, and if you ran this against the wrong setup, it can be very problematic because she's not inkable. So if she's in your hand, you pretty much have to play her, and with only doing 1 damage worth of attack, if you attack with her, you'd almost be guaranteeing your opponent's getting those extra characters. Which now brings us back to the card in question, Pete, Games Referee. When we look at it in the Steel Song deck, what ended up happening was it was pretty much an arms race. Whoever was getting to their Pete first would be able to stall out their opponent. Maybe you can wipe out your opponent's hand with a Whole New World, or you can sing your songs first so that your opponent can't play theirs. This also could maybe delay Naveen from coming down because Pete can come down before Naveen. And what we ended up seeing was actually a lot of decks starting to peel back on the amount of actions and items that they're running in their deck, just out of fear of Pete and not being able to play it or getting Daisy Ducked, and it ends up going to the bottom of your deck. So what ended up happening was we ended up seeing a lot of decks like this Emerald Amethyst deck that relies mostly on characters with very strong abilities when they enter the battlefield or when they leave the battlefield, so that if your opponent is including 4 copies of Pete, Games Referee, just like we've seen with previous item removal cards, they end up being quite useless. Now with Pete, he is inkable, so it's not useless per se. You can still use him early game. Once you have the knowledge of what your opponent's deck is, you can just get him early, ink him, and then not have to worry about top decking a less than optimal card. But when we look at a card like Daisy Duck, if we included 4 copies of Daisy Duck against this Emerald Amethyst deck, anytime that we would quest with her, our opponent's almost guaranteed to hit a character and get free card draw off of our card. And then we started to see the same thing with Emerald Amber. This one here, 58 characters, only 2 actions. Now the makeup of the decks and the actions that they take into the game do differ. I've seen Emerald Amethyst run Under the Sea for some extra removal. This one here is running Invited to the Ball, something that's also very popular in Mufasa decks. A new card that allows you to reveal the top 2 cards of your deck because they're almost 100% guaranteed to be characters. You basically are paying 2 to draw 2, which can be very powerful, especially in a deck like this that runs a lot of 1s and 2 drops. No matter when you hit this in the game, you should be able to play those characters And a lot of these 1-drops, 2-drops do quest for 2, allowing you to keep up that aggro pressure. All right, so now we've seen aggro decks start to gain popularity. Early in the set, we've seen a shift to more characters. And how are you going to go about and counter those characters? Well, it's going to be things like your Ruby cards, like your Brawls, your Dragonfires, your Be King Undisputed, your Be Prepared, or in Steel, you've got things like Grab Your Sword, Fire the Cannon, Smash, to deal with all these low to the ground characters. But, as we know, Pete does exist in this meta, so when you edit your deck to deal with the aggro, relying on more actions to take them out, now you have to worry about something like Pete Games Referee, a card that's going to delay your board clear ability and allow your opponent to make multiple plays before you can respond if you don't have the characters in your hand. Which brings us to the best performing deck at DLC Las Vegas, which is this Emerald Steel Discard Song deck. Now, this deck does have 4 copies of Pete to deal with your Ruby and your Steel removal, but if it's not able to hit a Pete early on, it also has Prince John, which has Ward, the Muses, which has Ward, and the Muses in particular, every time that we play a song, you're going to be able to bounce one of those aggro characters so that they can't quest right away. Now let's look at the Ruby Sapphire deck that took home the top prize at DLC Birmingham. This deck, you'll see they are running 8 actions, but most of the actions actually are going to be coming in before Pete can come in and block us. We've got Hideaway, something that can be played pretty much whenever, but more importantly, can be used to shut down a Fishbone Quill. Visions of the Future, a 2-cost card, allowing you to go a lot deeper into your deck to pull out the perfect card with the given situation. But I really wanted to bring attention to the 2 cards that were almost always a lock for 3 or 4 copies before this set, and that would be How Far I'll Go and Be Prepared. 4 Be Prepared was a very common strategy in set 3 and set 4, as it was a great way for Ruby players to completely clear out the board. You saw this work really well with Ruby Amethyst, where they are able to capitalize on their characters coming off the board, gaining lore with goats, drawing cards with Rabbit and Cusco, while also keeping their castles in place, getting that passive lore. For Ruby Sapphire, they're able to get Be Prepared a lot quicker, allowing you to completely clear out the early game, and then this deck in particular is able to survive the hyper aggro matchup because they quickly get to Be Prepared with things like 1 Jump Ahead, your Fishbone Quill, your How Far I'll Go, and now you're Be Preparing on turn 4 if you have the perfect situation and you're singing How Far I'll Go, allowing you to turn the game back into your favor and allow you to win very quickly with your massive ink pile. But how does this deck match up against Pete? Pete completely shuts down How Far I'll Go, preventing you from getting that quick ramp to your Be Prepared. And when Pete's run in more aggressive Steel Song decks, like the one we see here where you have your Piglets and your Mr. Smeeze, your Ruby Sapphire deck has to account for that, and you'll see things like running 3 Ice Blocks, running Fang Crossbow. But then more importantly, now they're running 4 Sisu empowered siblings. This is a card where at most we saw 2 of these being played very early on. Now moving on to the second part of the video, the other reason that this card was so talked about in the Lorcana community was apparently there was some confusion on when this card's ability would be active. Is it active the moment that you play it in the game, and then it just exists until your next turn? Or do you have to declare that you are playing it, and now your opponent can't play any actions? Now, in my eyes, this is I've played this character. If your opponent messes up and plays something they shouldn't have, you have every right to call them out on that, and in most cases allow them to make a different play. Now let's take a look at the official rulings for misplays in Disney Lorcana. Ruling 2.3, General Rule Error. A player commits an in-game rule violation that does not fall under inkwell errors or card count errors. A player missing an effect that uses the word may has not committed this infraction. Now our card Pete does not have the word may in the description. So apparently what was happening was, even though it was not being spoken that the effect is in play, opponents were not properly taking into consideration that a Pete was played when they were making their next turn, and they were getting competitive warnings because they were making illegal plays by playing actions. Now I do think that this is the proper way of going about things, as especially in a tournament setting, if ever you are uncertain of a rule or a card description, my first step is always to ask the other player to see the card to verify that you read the text correctly, but then you also have the resource of a judge available to give you proper guidance on the proper play. So here we have a Facebook post back in August, just summing up what has gone on over on the Lorcana official Discord page, where the Pete debate was kind of boiling over. Now, they have said that they are actively looking at the language for correcting an illegal action like this, just to be a little bit more clear. But one of their main principles for Disney Lorcana rulings is that they want to limit the amount of gotcha moments in the game where a player kind of baits you into making an illegal move, so then you get an automatic win. So continuing on here with the ruling, they say, keep in mind for this ruling, we have a Pete played but not announced. Now, when I typically play, I'll usually be communicating all my plays in as much detail as I can. Typically, if I have a character that gives ward to other characters, I'll point that out to my opponent. Same thing, like if I play a Pete, I'll usually communicate that they can't play actions until my next turn. Little things like that, just to make it a little bit more clear. And then your opponent doesn't have to completely rethink their play because they've then made an illegal play. So we have Pete, played but not announced. The opponent attempts to play an action. All the player needs to do is say, you can't do that because of Pete, and then the game should move on as normal. In their eyes, the trigger has been acknowledged when it actually matters to the game state. Even though maybe you didn't say it when you played the Pete, you're acknowledging it when they're trying to do an action, and it's still valid because the card doesn't say may. It is a play and then has a set end period. But I know that kind of rambled on just a little bit. What do you guys think of Pete? What do you guys think of the ruling on this? As I said before, maybe this is because I did play a bit of Pixelboard. I do play on Inktable where things are pretty automated and they do prevent you from making illegal moves. In the case of Inktable, they actually have little like pop-up icons whenever there's like a status effect on the field, which is pretty useful to hover over and figure out why you can't do something. But that does it for our deep dive into Pete, the card that not only changed the meta, but also kicked up a firestorm up on Discord. I think it's fun to take a look at cards like this that have a big impact, because now even as we're starting set championships and the Seattle DLC, we're gonna see a completely different meta as an answer to what we just saw not even a few weeks ago. And then once the new set comes out, this card might be irrelevant. There might be a stronger version of this card, or this could be a must-glued once again in every steel deck. And then we play the game of hot potato, unsleeving, sleeving up new versions of our decks, and we go around again. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We do have more gameplay content coming to the channel, so make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.